Story number 1. The phone call. One of the creepiest things that has ever happened to me started with a completely normal phone call. It was a quiet winter evening. Snow was falling outside, and I was at home talking to my grandmother on the phone. We were chatting about random things, just like we always did. A few minutes into the conversation, I noticed she had stopped responding. "Grandma? Hello?" Nothing. I figured she might have gotten distracted, or maybe the connection had cut out. "Can you hear me?" Still silence. Then, without warning, the silence exploded into a scream, a horrifying scream. It was so sudden that I froze. After that came heavy breathing, loud bangs, creaking sounds, and what sounded like someone running for their life. But the worst part was what came next. I started hearing more voices, a lot more. It sounded like dozens of people screaming at the same time. Some sounded terrified. Others sounded like they were in pain. The entire thing felt like something straight out of a nightmare. I wanted to hang up immediately, but I couldn't move. I just sat there listening. Eventually, I managed to end the call. My hands were shaking. A few seconds later, my phone rang. It was my grandmother. Before I could ask her what happened, she asked me, "Are you okay?" Confused, I told her I was about to ask the same thing. Then she said something I'll never forget. I heard it too. To this day, neither of us knows what happened on that call. Story number 2. Give me a sign. This happened when I was staying at my grandmother's house in a small village. One evening, my friend and I were exploring the area when we came across a huge abandoned building. The place looked creepy, even in broad daylight. My friend wanted to go inside. I decided to stay outside and wait for him. While standing there alone, I jokingly said, "If anything's here, give me a sign." I laughed and completely forgot about it. A few hours later, my friend was spending the night at my house. It was around 2 a.m. We were lying in bed talking when my friend suddenly went silent. I looked over and saw him staring at the window. We lived on the first floor. There was something outside. At first, I could only make out a dark shape. Then I saw it too. Neither of us said a word. We immediately pulled the blanket over our heads like little kids. A few minutes later, something crashed in the kitchen. Then another noise. Then another. It sounded like someone was moving around inside the house. We kept telling ourselves there had to be a logical explanation. But the sounds kept coming. Finally, I told my friend about the joke I'd made outside the abandoned building. The moment I said it, the color drained from his face. Neither of us got much sleep that night. Even now, years later, I still wonder what was standing outside that window. Story number 3. Someone outside the door. One winter evening, I was home alone. My parents were both working late, and I was in my room watching a TV show. I live in a house, so hearing noises outside isn't unusual. But this felt different. My cats suddenly became restless. They kept staring toward the front door. The dogs outside started barking nonstop. I assumed my parents had arrived home. So I walked to the front door and opened it. Nobody was there. I checked outside. Nothing. I closed the door and went back to my room. The animals still wouldn't calm down. That's when I turned off the TV and heard footsteps. Someone was walking outside the front door. Slowly. Back and forth. The panic hit me instantly. I called my parents, no answer. I called again. Still nothing. At that point, I locked myself in my room and hid. Every minute felt like an hour. Finally, my parents called back. I told them everything. As soon as they heard how scared I was, they rushed home. When they arrived, they searched around the house and the yard. Nobody was there. No footprints, No signs that anyone had been outside at all. To this day, I still lock every door before it gets dark, because I never found out who or what was walking around my house that night. Story number 4. The snoring. I've always been afraid of the dark. Not because of the dark itself, but because of what I can't see. One night, I was home alone while my parents were away. I was getting ready to sleep when I heard what sounded like a light switch being flipped in my parents' bedroom. I ignored it. The walls in our building are thin, so I assumed it came from a neighbor's apartment. A few minutes later, I heard the floor creak in the hallway. Again, I tried to convince myself it was nothing. Maybe the cat, maybe the building settling. Then I heard something that made my blood run cold. Snoring. Loud, unmistakable human snoring. It sounded like someone was sleeping somewhere inside the apartment. I sat frozen on my bed. The sound continued. Eventually, I forced myself to get up and check every room. Nothing. Nobody. Every room was empty. The lights were off. The doors were locked. The apartment was silent. The next morning, I told my parents what happened. They laughed and said it was probably my imagination or a neighbor. Maybe they're right. But one detail still bothers me. Nobody lives directly below us, and the snoring sounded much closer than that. Story number 5. Something in the water. A few years ago, my family and I went on vacation to the Sea of Azov. The beach was almost empty, the water was clear, and the weather was perfect. My brother and I brought an inflatable mattress into the water. We had a game we liked to play called King of the Hill, where we'd try to push each other off and claim the mattress for ourselves. To do that safely, we had to swim farther away from shore. Eventually, we reached the point where the color of the water started to change, becoming much darker beneath us. We were about to start playing when my brother suddenly froze. His face went completely pale. He was staring behind me. "There's a dolphin," he said. At first, I thought he was joking, but then I remembered that a few days earlier we'd actually seen dolphins near the shore. Suddenly, the situation didn't feel funny anymore. We immediately started heading back toward the beach. Halfway there, curiosity got the better of me. I turned around, and that's when I saw it. Something broke the surface of the water. For a split second, I caught sight of a large silhouette and a tail before it disappeared again. My brother hadn't been joking. It probably was just a dolphin. But when you're far from shore, floating above deep water, even something harmless can feel terrifying. To this day, I still remember the fear I felt in that moment. Story number 6. My dad saved us twice. There have been 2 moments in my life when things could have ended very badly. The first happened after work one evening. My mom and I were sitting in the car waiting for my dad. While we were waiting, I noticed a strong smell of gasoline. I mentioned it to my mom. She said we'd wait for Dad and see what he thought. The moment he got to the car, he noticed something was wrong. Without hesitation, he shut the engine off and told us to get out immediately. The look on his face was enough to make us panic. Later, we learned that the problem was serious. Had we continued driving, the situation could have become extremely dangerous. Thankfully, my dad caught it in time. The second incident happened during a road trip. Our car kept showing a warning about one of the tires. Dad checked it multiple times, but everything looked normal. That night, we stopped at a parking area and slept for a few hours. Around 4 a.m., we got back on the road. About 10 minutes later, we heard a strange sound coming from the back of the vehicle. It sounded like something was loose. Dad reacted instantly and pulled over. Seconds later, the tire failed completely. If it had happened while we were driving at high speed, the outcome could have been disastrous. Ever since then, we've joked that my dad is our guardian angel. but honestly, I don't think it's much of a joke. Story number 7. The Shadow. I was around 10 years old when this happened. My family was visiting some close friends, and they had a large trampoline in their backyard. At one point, all the other kids wandered off, leaving me alone. That's when I noticed something strange. A shadow. The best way I can describe it is that it looked like a monkey climbing a pole. I could clearly see what looked like arms reaching upward and pulling the figure higher. The movement seemed completely real. Naturally, I looked at the actual pole. There was nothing there. Nothing at all. I stared back at the shadow. It was still moving. I started calling for the other kids so they could see it too. Nobody came. Then the shadow began moving downward, slowly, almost as if it realized I was watching it. A few moments later, it disappeared into the darker shadows near a fence. I never saw it again. I've always had a vivid imagination. Even as a child, I knew that. But the reason I still remember this event so clearly is because it felt real. More real than something my imagination could have created. And to this day, I still don't know what I actually saw. Story number 8. The Voice in the Woods. This happened recently. One evening, my friends and I were walking another friend home. The quickest route went through a small wooded area. We'd taken that path countless times before and never experienced anything unusual. There were 3 of us. To make the walk more interesting, my friend and I decided to prank the third one. We played creepy sounds from a phone speaker and laughed as she got scared. Eventually, we stopped in the middle of the woods. I turned the sounds off. Everything became completely silent. For about a minute, nobody said anything. Then we heard it. The sound came from the trees to our right. At first, none of us could even describe what we were hearing. It wasn't a person. It wasn't an animal. It sounded like dozens of voices layered on top of one another. The noise vibrated and shifted in a way that felt completely unnatural. We all froze. For a moment, we thought one of us was still playing a prank, but nobody was. Then came the sound of branches snapping, from the same direction, closer this time, as if something was moving toward us through the trees. That was enough. We turned and ran. None of us looked back. We didn't stop until we were out of the wooded area. When we finally did stop, we looked up. Hanging above the horizon was a huge red full moon. Maybe there was a perfectly logical explanation for what we heard. Maybe there wasn't. But one thing is certain. None of us have ever taken that shortcut at night again.